Everyone said waking up at 5 a.m. would change my life. I read it in every article, heard it from every person who seemed to have their life together. I didn't believe them, not really, but something about the certainty in their voices made me want to test it for myself. So I made a promise to myself, the kind you're almost afraid to say out loud in case you break it. For the next 21 days, I would wake up at 5 o'clock every single morning, no matter how impossible it felt the night before. That first night, I barely slept. I kept doing the math in my head, counting the hours until the alarm, half hoping I'd sleep through it and have a reason to quit before I'd even begun. I pinned a small note above my bed. 21 days, it said, in handwriting that already looked more hopeful than I felt. I told no one about the promise. If I failed, I wanted it to be quietly mine to fail. I'd tried mornings before, dozens of times, and quit within a week. But this time felt different. Or maybe I just wanted it to feel different badly enough to believe it. Either way, there was only one way to find out. I turned off the light and lay there in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat, half amused at how much anxiety one simple alarm could cause. 21 days. Starting tomorrow, whether I was ready or not. I fell asleep somewhere past midnight, the promise sitting quietly in the back of my mind like a stone dropped into still water. Tomorrow, the ripples would begin, whether I noticed them yet or not. The alarm felt cruel. 5 in the morning has a particular kind of darkness to it, the kind that makes every warm blanket feel like an argument you're about to lose. I almost gave up before I even got out of bed. My whole body argued for 5 more minutes, then 5 more after that. But I remembered the note pinned above my head, and I forced my feet onto the cold floor. Outside, the world was still asleep. Not a single light on in the building across the street, not a single sound except my own breathing fogging faintly against the cold glass. I made a warm cup of tea, moving slowly through the dark kitchen, like someone still deciding whether this was a good idea. The kettle's whistle felt impossibly loud in the silence. I sat by the window and watched the sunrise in complete silence. No phone, no music. Nothing but the sky, slowly shifting from black to deep blue to the palest gold I'd ever paid attention to. Somewhere around 5:40, the light changed completely, and for one unexpected moment, all that grogginess softened into something quieter. I didn't feel accomplished exactly. I just felt awake in a way I hadn't in a long time. 1 day down, 20 to go. It didn't feel like a victory yet, but it also didn't feel like the disaster I'd braced myself for, and that alone felt worth noticing. By day 3, I noticed birds singing before the city woke up. A whole orchestra of them, tuning up in the dark like they had somewhere important to be before anyone else was watching. I'd lived in that apartment for 3 years and never once heard this. It made me wonder what else I'd slept through without noticing. How many small, ordinary miracles happen right on schedule while we're unconscious to them. It was the first time in years that my mornings felt peaceful instead of like something to survive. No emails yet, no traffic yet, just birds and me, and a sky slowly deciding what color to become. By the time the sun actually broke the horizon, the birds had gone quiet again, as if their job were done and mine was only beginning. I stood there a moment longer than I needed to, just to hold on to it. I made breakfast slower than usual that morning, in no rush to start the parts of the day I used to dread. The birds had reminded me that some things happen whether or not anyone's watching, and I wanted to keep watching anyway. I wrote it down before I forgot. Birds, before the city wakes. It felt important in a way I couldn't quite explain yet, like the first sentence of a story I hadn't realized I'd started writing. By 6:30, the city had caught up to me. Cars and voices and the ordinary noise returning. But for that first golden half hour, I'd had the whole sunrise entirely to myself. By day 5, I started taking slow walks through quiet streets. It wasn't part of the original plan, just something my body seemed to want once it was already awake, and the world outside looked too calm to ignore. The streets at that hour belonged to almost no one. A jogger here, a delivery truck there, the occasional light flicking on in a kitchen window. It felt like being let in on a secret the rest of the city was still sleeping through. Every sunrise looked different. Some mornings the sky turned a soft lavender gray, others a fierce orange that made the whole street look like it was on fire in the best possible way. I started walking just to see which one I'd get. I'd sit for a few minutes on the same bench each morning and just watch the light change. Every morning felt like a fresh beginning. Which sounds like something from a poster until you actually feel it firsthand at 5:30 in the morning. By the time I turned back home, a few other early risers had appeared. A woman walking a dog, an old man opening his shop shutters. We'd nod at each other, a quiet club of people who'd chosen to meet the day early. My legs felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with exercise and everything to do with simply choosing to be present for something instead of sleeping through it. 5 days in, and the mornings had stopped feeling like a punishment. They'd started feeling like the one part of the day that was entirely, quietly mine. By day 7, instead of checking my phone, I began writing one page in my journal. It felt strange at first, reaching for a pen instead of a screen, like my hand had forgotten there was another option. The first few lines were clumsy, mostly just describing the weather or what I'd dreamed. But somewhere around the middle of the page, the sentences started sounding less like small talk and more like the truth. For the first time, I listened to my own thoughts instead of immediately reaching to drown them out. It turned out I had opinions about my own life that I'd been too busy scrolling to notice. Some mornings the page filled with worries. Other mornings with small gratitudes I hadn't noticed until I tried to name them. Either way, writing them down made them feel lighter, like setting down a bag I hadn't realized I was carrying. I noticed I reached for my phone out of habit at least a dozen times that morning, and each time I caught myself and put it back down. The habit was loud, but the quiet was starting to get louder. By the end of the week, the journal had become less of a chore and more of a conversation I looked forward to having with myself before the rest of the world got a chance to speak first. 7 days in, and I understood something I hadn't expected. The phone had never actually been keeping me company. It had just been keeping me busy, which isn't the same thing at all. By day 10, my tiny morning routine became something I looked forward to. Tea, first. Always the same mug. Poured slowly enough to actually notice the steam curling upward. Then reading, just a chapter, sometimes two, in the small reading chair that had somehow become the most important piece of furniture I owned. I read slower in the mornings, like the words meant more, before the day got loud. Then stretching, nothing elaborate, just enough to remind my body it was allowed to move slowly for once, instead of rushing straight into the day's demands. Then a quiet breakfast, eaten at the table instead of standing over the sink. Plate arranged with more care than the food probably deserved, but that felt good to give it anyway. No rushing. That was the whole secret, if it even was one. Just doing each small thing without racing to the next, like the morning itself had all the time in the world and had decided to share it with me. It always startled me a little, glancing at the clock and realizing it was barely 7. Tea, reading, stretching, breakfast. An entire small world had unfolded, and the actual day hadn't even started yet. I used to think mornings were something to get through as quickly as possible. 10 days in, I understood they were the only part of the day nobody else had a claim on yet. Whatever the rest of the day held, I'd already had my quiet hour. It made everything that came after feel a little less able to rattle me. By day 14, people said I looked calmer. A coworker mentioned it first, almost in passing, asking if I'd started doing something different. I hadn't realized it showed. I smiled more without even realizing it. Little things that used to irritate me, a slow elevator, a long line, an unanswered email, seemed to just slide past, instead of catching and pulling at my mood. I hadn't set out to become a calmer person. I'd just set out to wake up earlier, but somewhere in those quiet, unhurried mornings, the calm had apparently been assembling itself without asking my permission. A friend asked over coffee what had changed. I tried to explain: the tea, the walks, the journal, the bird song, but it sounded too small when I said it out loud. Somehow the smallness was exactly the point. Even my evenings had changed. I wasn't dreading the 5 o'clock alarm the way I had 2 weeks earlier. If anything, I was starting to look forward to it, which felt like the strangest kind of victory. I thought about the version of myself from 2 weeks ago, the one who almost quit before the first alarm even finished ringing. She would not have believed this version was possible, and I wasn't entirely sure I believed it either. 14 days in, and the calm had stopped feeling like a temporary mood and started feeling like something closer to a personality. I wasn't sure yet if it would last. I only knew I wanted to keep finding out. By day 18, I stopped counting the days. I'd been marking each morning off on a small calendar, but somewhere along the way I'd forgotten to check it, too busy simply living the mornings instead of tracking them. Waking up early no longer felt like a challenge. My body had simply started expecting it, the way it expects hunger at certain hours or tiredness at the end of a long day. It had become ordinary in the best possible sense. The whole routine ran on its own now. Tea and reading and the walk and the journal, each piece fitting into the next without me having to think about any of it. It became my favorite part of life, quietly, without any single dramatic morning to mark the shift. I recognize the same faces on my morning walks now. The dog walker, the shop owner, the elderly man who watered his garden before the sun fully rose. We'd become a small, unspoken community, all of us choosing the same quiet hour. I used to need a reason to get up early. An early flight, an important meeting, something urgent pulling me out of bed. Now the sunrise itself had become reason enough, which felt like an entirely different way of living. I wrote just one line that morning. I don't miss who I used to be at 5 a.m. It wasn't a dramatic revelation. It was just quietly, simply true. 18 days in, and the version of me who'd almost quit on day one felt like someone I used to know rather than someone I still was. The mornings had rewritten something in me, quietly, one sunrise at a time. By day 21, the alarm rang exactly as it had every morning before it. And for the first time, I understood it wasn't the sound that had changed. I had. I walked further than usual that morning, out past the familiar streets to where the hills began. Some quiet instinct telling me this particular sunrise deserved more than my usual bench. The climb wasn't difficult, just steep enough to make my breath visible in the cool air. Steep enough to feel like I was earning the view waiting at the top. I stood outside as the sun slowly rose over the hills, and for a long moment I didn't think about anything at all. I simply watched, the way I imagine people watched sunrises before there was anything else competing for their attention. Then I realized something. Waking up at 5 a.m. didn't magically change my life, not on its own. If I'd woken up early and then filled the hours the same way I always had, nothing would have shifted at all. The small habits I repeated every morning did. The tea, the walks, the journal, the quiet, unhurried breakfasts. None of them were remarkable on their own. Repeated 21 times, they had rebuilt something in me I hadn't even known was broken. 21 days ago, I'd made a promise to a version of myself who didn't believe it would work. Standing there in that light, I finally understood what she couldn't have known yet. It was never about the hour. It was about what I chose to do with it. And maybe, I thought, as I walked back down toward the waking town, the person I had been searching for all those years wasn't somewhere far away at all. She'd been quietly waiting for me at sunrise all along, in the tea going cool while I watched the light change, in the pages of a journal I used to think I didn't have time for. In 21 small mornings I almost gave up on. I stepped back into my apartment the way you return to a familiar room after being away. Same furniture, same walls, but something about how I moved through it felt different, lighter, more entirely my own. I kept a small stone from that hillside on my windowsill, not because it was special to look at, but because it reminded me, every morning after, of the exact moment the promise finally made sense. The 21 days ended, but the mornings didn't. There was no reason to stop something that had quietly become the best part of being alive. I still wake at 5 most mornings now, though I've stopped needing the alarm most days. My body just knows. The way it knows to breathe, the way it knows the sky is about to do something worth watching. Every sunrise since has looked a little different, the way every sunrise always has. I just finally learned to be awake for it, and to notice that the person I'd been looking for was never far. She was only ever waiting, quietly, for morning.